So hello, everyone. I first want to thank Dr. Spogus for helping me, for inviting me to come, and also Dan Siepman for making this one of the easiest transitions into speaking here. I've been asked to present on NIH opportunities for international health collaboration, but rather than make this just a list of the myriad opportunities that are out there welcoming health collaborations internationally, I'm going to try and help you in locating where they are on a very archaic NIH platform. So I can maybe point you to some places. There's going to be quite a lot of links in here, so don't feel you have to write this. I'm assuming that they will receive an electronic version of the slides, so there will be hot links that you can click, and hopefully you'll find some information there. One thing I want to just focus on from what John said about my introduction is that I did write a Fulbright grant. The only reason I'm saying that is because that's my experience in grant writing, and I want to bring that up later on to talk to you about what I learned from writing that grant and why the strategies that I used in order to get that grant. So today we're going to talk about mainly the Fogarty International Center as a centerpiece of funding global research. Its mission and visions, some programs and funding opportunities that they specifically have. We're also going to talk about other international programs at NIH, their funding opportunity announcements and priorities. Finding how to find funding opportunities on the NIH website, and also, since I'm a research developer, some research development considerations as you work on your proposal. A few housekeeping rules, if we could save questions until the end, because I've asked Ingrid to hold up a neon sign when I'm talking too long, so so she has it there. So I'll try and get through my talk, and then we'll have questions towards the end. And a couple of apologies. First off, research development and research administration is massively acronym heavy, so I will try my best not to use acronyms. There will be a couple that I will use quite frequently, one of which you see on this page here. Funding opportunity announcements are abbreviated FOAs. So if I say FOAs, it means the opportunity that you're going to be applying to. And NIH has institutes and centers that I'll show you in just a minute, and they are abbreviated ICs, and rather than say institutes and centers throughout the talk, I probably will say ICs. So just keep those in mind, but I will try my best not to use acronyms. So NIH has 27 institutes and centers, ICs. The three at the very bottom are ones that do not have funding authority. One of them on the right side is the Center for Scientific Review. That's where peer review is housed. Excuse me. That's where peer review is housed, and all of your grants, for the most part, get the study sections live there, they get reviewed there, they get assigned there, and then the scores move to the various institutes above. But if you'll notice above, the other 24 institutes and centers do have funding authority, so keep that in mind. How many of you, if you can see at the very bottom center, there's one called the Fogarty International Center that we're going to talk about a little more. How many of you have submitted to Fogarty already? No? How many of you have submitted to other NIH institutes? Okay. All right. We're going to, hopefully with the help of apps here, we're going to try and get you to submit some more of those with this information. So keep in mind, as I said earlier, there are any number of funding opportunities that welcome international collaboration. The titles do not have to say international in them. There are plenty of ICs, institutes, and centers that do want you to work across the world with partnering institutions. One that comes to mind that we work with very frequently is something called the NCI, the National Cancer Institute Cancer Moonshot initiative, and we have grants and awards from them with collaborations with international universities, even though nowhere in the funding opportunity did it say this requires international. So just keep that in mind, that the volume of opportunities that are out there don't have to say that keyword, and yet you could still be welcome to submit. So the key part of the talk is the John E. Fogarty International Center for Advanced Study in the Health Sciences. So that's abbreviated FIC, Fogarty. And I want to talk a little bit about the mission and vision. I was just going to give you like 3 minutes to just quickly parse through this, and then I want to focus you on certain areas that you can target when you're writing your proposal. So just take a couple minutes to just read this through. Okay, you may not have finished, but to keep going, every institute and center at NIH has a mission, has a vision, and you can learn a lot from those that'll help in the development of your proposal, regardless of whatever international opportunity you have chosen to submit to. So if we're looking at the mission of Fogarty, they're focusing on facilitating global health research, building partnerships, and training the next generation of researchers. So think about your research. Does it hit any of those major mission areas? The vision focuses on reducing the burden of disease, promoting health, and extending longevity. So this too gives you some information about how you can help Fogarty reach its mission. And as I mentioned earlier, with my Fulbright grant, it was a submission to the Swiss Confederation to work on RT-PCR on gene expression in the rat brain after cocaine administration. Fogarty back in the 90s, Fulbright back in the 90s did not fund many science applications. They mainly funded humanities and social sciences. So how did I get that grant? I focused on the needs of the sponsor, and the sponsor was the Swiss Confederation. What was their issue? What were their priorities at the time? Well, they were having a very intense heroin addiction epidemic. So I wrote my cocaine research to speak to that. I'm doing some drug research here. The information that you learn from this might be applied to research that's being done in heroin and can help you in your battle against heroin addiction. And that helped me with the reviewers to get a very rare science application funded. And so I've been talking in my research development life about how you need to write to the sponsor's needs. And if you can do that and fulfill their priorities, you've got a leg up. So as I mentioned, each year, the majority of institutes and centers put out their priorities. So these are the Fogarty 2020 priorities. There's 4 of them listed here. Again, I want to just focus on a few of them. So strengthening the biomedical workforce is investing in current and future leaders and strengthening long-term capacity of the research institutions, building on basic science. So they're very, NIH in general and Fogarty is very focused on supporting basic science, but they also want to find ways that the health innovations learned there are translated and implemented to the clinic. And they also are focused on tools and technologies. So does your research do the same? because then this is one of the priorities that you hit. They're focused on low-cost tools, medical devices, and other technologies with the potential to transform global health. And for example, they've funded a program where mobile and wireless technologies for low and middle income countries are using to study the effectiveness in improving health. So do you have something along these lines that would fit with this priority? And then below is exploring the next frontier of strategic partnership, which really speaks to some international collaborations. These are the list of current Fogarty International Programs for research and training. I just wanted to point to a few of them, but each of them listed here has funding opportunities that are current. Some of them don't have any running at the moment, but when they do, they will be listed here. So if any of these programs are of interest with you, I definitely think you should follow those. There are a few here like the Global Brain Disorders Research Program at the very bottom left, and the Global Infectious Disease Research Program that focuses on, there are a variety of research and training programs focused on fostering international biomedical research collaborations, enhancing the ongoing US-based research programs, addressing these specific research areas, and increasing the capacity of developing countries. So if you're interested in one of these programs that's existing now, and they've had many in the past, and they have an archive as well, so you can see what they did have. But with these links, current FOAs are available as you go through them. One thing to mention with the following slide is this is a list of programs that focus on career development, so mainly for fellows and junior faculty. How many junior faculty are in the room? Okay. So one of the things that is here for fellows and junior faculty is the JSPS. That'll be a topic of conversation later today. But I did want to mention an initiative that's NIH-wide, which is something called the Next Generation Researcher Initiative. And this is specifically designed to accelerate junior faculty to their first research grant at NIH, because I think the median year for the first R01 currently is 40 years, and they're trying to desperately move that down so that you get your first research grant much earlier in your career. In order to do that, they are providing a boost to early stage investigators. These are those that are within 10 years of their terminal degree. So if you are an early stage investigator, you apply for an R01, you'll be put in a separate pool of reviewers against your peers as opposed to against other senior scientists. So that'll give you a boost in review. The other side of the Next Generation Researchers Initiative is if you score below the 10th percentile, you have a possibility to get 2 extra years. So with the regular 5-year R01, you could get 7 years, which is a great start for a junior investigator. And we've had a few of them at MSK, and we're really excited about the possibility. And we have an initiative to support junior investigators in proposal development and in guiding them as to how to put together the most fundable proposal in order to make them eligible for the Next Generation Researcher Initiative. So that's just a little bit of an aside for those of you interested in career development awards. I wanted to just quickly go over an example program, some funding opportunities, and an award that all follow out of one particular area that Fogarty supports. So one of the programs that was on that very long list of links is the Global Brain Disorders Research Program. If you click on that link, you have some current funding opportunities there. There's an R01 for the global brain and nervous systems disorder research, and an R21, which is a small research grant that's normally a 2-year grant. I've listed out the budget, the span of the award, and also the deadlines. So if you are interested in these types of grants, in this type of research, and are interested in the November deadline, please speak with your grants office and with people at APPS to help you. It's not too early to start thinking about a November deadline. Likewise, with any other funding opportunity that you find in these links throughout these searches, please keep in mind that as soon as you know you're going to be submitting, talk to the experts here at CUNY. And you can see an example award that was at the bottom. There was a planning grant through Northwestern University with Japan and South Africa as a collaboration to research the neuroimaging of emotion. So this just gives you an idea of some of the funding that has come out of these funding opportunities. And this information is available online on Fogarty sites underneath the various programs. So there's a lot of good detail that you can learn from here as you're starting to fit your research into a funding opportunity. So here's some current international opportunities that are in existence, again, listing the budget and the deadlines. Just as some examples, the first one is funded by Fogarty and the National Cancer Institute. So this is kind of to show you that these Fogarty opportunities are supported by multiple institutes, not only by Fogarty. And I'll tell you why that's important in just a moment. So the first one focuses on prolonging the field experience of researchers to help them become stronger global health investigators. But if you go lower in that funding opportunity, that very first one, you'll see that it's funded through NCI's Center for Global Health, which is yet another program for international global health, but that's focused on the National Cancer Institute. So we took a look at some others, but NCI has their own as well. So again, as you explore each individual institute, you'll get deeper and deeper into areas where you can find funding opportunities. The next one is supported by Fogarty and the National Institute of Drug Abuse. The following two are Fogarty National Institutes of Mental Health, NINDS, and then the last one is Fogarty, NIDA, Mental Health, and the National Cancer Institute. And the reason why I'm just highlighting a few of these and talking about the multiple centers and institutes that support these funding opportunities along with Fogarty is because I'm going to talk about why that's important. All of the supporting institutes are funding institutes. So every one of them has a chance to fund applications that go to this opportunity. And I'll talk about why that's important. This is a list of a decade of news stories from individual institutes and centers at the NIH. These all came from international global health funding opportunities that were in existence, and here are the successes written up in blogs and in articles. If there's any institute of interest to you, I highly recommend that you just pop in and see what was available through that center and what the successes were, because past opportunities that may be expired now give suggestions about what may come back. And it can start a conversation with NIH staff about how your research fits in with something similar to this interest. Is that going to come back? Are you still interested in that? Do you have a funding opportunity that will fit for my research? Those are conversations that you can have with NIH, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So this here is a link to web pages on various NIH institutes and centers. I chose 3 of them for foreign grantees. So these are the international programs that the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute have, that the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases have, and that the National Institute of Drug Abuse has. 1, 2, 3. So if you take a look at what NHLBI, the first one, offers, you get a lot of information that could help you in guiding your research. What is the mission of NHLBI? What are the research priorities for 2020? What's the particular focus of the international program that's listed here? All of that information lives under these links, and you can pull that all together to guide your response to a funding opportunity. So each of those 4 activities that are listed under the NHLBI link have a little blurb that you can read when you go deep into this, if lung, blood, and heart diseases are something that your research focuses on. For NIAID, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, there's a blurb here that I included about why they support global research as a priority, and that is because they feel that this doesn't only affect individuals, but affect families and affect the global community as well. That's something to say in your research as well. I'm doing research, and the reason why it's important is because it affects the global community. You say that line, you're matching the mission of this international program. And then finally, the link down at the bottom for NIDA offers a whole bunch of foreign supported FOAs that you might want to explore. So those 3 institutes and centers from the prior page have a number of priorities that are listed here. Once you find the area that you're interested in, I would encourage you to explore. I listed here NIDA's strategic plan. Most every year an institute puts out a strategic plan for the next year or 3 or 5 years, listing the priorities. There's also a list here of international scientific priority areas that you might be interested in. And you'll notice at the very end, one of the international scientific priority areas that's available from NIDA are any of the priority focus areas for the entire institute. So they have specific ones for international, but if you fit into any of the other NIDA ones, we'll take those too. So the whole thing kind of gives you an idea of what is out there and how you can fit your grant to any particular funding opportunity. So there's been a lot of links. A lot of these links have various funding opportunities. There's a lot of digging that needs to go on that I gave you some direction to throughout all of these institutes, throughout all of the pages for NIH. But what's the easiest way to stay abreast of NIH funding opportunities? There's something called the NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts. How many of you received this already? Okay, good. After this talk, you should all sign up. So what this is a weekly publication. It lists all of the new funding opportunities that came out just in this week. You can subscribe for it, and it falls into your inbox on Fridays. It's very easy to parse. There's not a huge amount that is released each week, but if you just take 5 minutes to take a look, when your funding opportunity comes out, you will have snagged it right there. There's also an entire database to search for funding opportunities based on keywords based on the mechanism, based on deadline dates, so that you can start afresh and take a look at any that you've missed. But I definitely highly recommend subscribing to the NIH guide. There's also other ways to receive the guide, which is in the middle section of the slide. And I want to give you a caveat to read the NIH notices that are part of the guide, because you get a lot of good information there. If you've chosen a funding opportunity and they've extended the deadline date, they're going to publish a notice about that. If they have extended the budget amount, they're going to publish a notice about that. So keep an eye on those notices. Again, there's only a certain amount every week. And if you just keep on looking for changes to the funding opportunity that you've chosen, it can really help you in getting a fundable application out the door. One other thing that's a benefit of taking a look at the NIH guide and the NIH notices on that guide is that they list opportunities that they have intents to publish. So I gave you an example here, strengthening institutional capacity to conduct global cancer research. This opportunity has not been released yet, but back on December 10th, they said they are interested in publishing that. The opportunity is planned to be released next week. So we've already had over a month to start preparing for this funding opportunity. Every bit of time that you get to start preparing is important, and the only reason you would have seen this is if you were following the guide. So now, when the opportunity is released next week, and you have a truncated amount of time to get your deadline, to get your application in, which is usually 60 days, we've already had a month to prep. There's a lot of information in the funding opportunity that we didn't have yet, but you can still get your team together. You can still talk about a topic. There's a lot that can be done within extra month's time. So I really highly recommend the funding, the NIH guide. Also at CUNY, you have a number of databases to search. You have Pivot and you have Grants Forward. And if you have questions about using those, just reach out to your grants office at your university and also reach out to the apps office. And then my favorite area is research development. So I have a number of research development considerations and caveats that I'd like to suggest to you. As I've been saying quite a lot, start early, start the research early. Talk to your grants office when you even have an inkling of an idea that you want to submit a grant, because they have a lot of resources for you, they can share it with you, and you'll get just that farther much ahead. Read funding opportunity announcements through the guide, through your search engines. When you find one, they're written in a very opaque way. Go through them, read it very clearly, and make a checklist. What do you need? Because at the end, when the deadline is looming, you're going to be rushed, and you want to make sure you have everything listed out to make a fundable proposal go out the door. I can't emphasize this next one more importantly, which is consult with the NIH program officer or scientific officer. And why is that? They are there to fund successful science. They want to do that. They get their money from Congress. Every year they have to go back to Congress to ask for more, and they do that by showing the stellar science that they've supported in the past year. They want your science. They have expertise. They have knowledge about how NIH works. So talk with them. And how do you talk with them? Okay, I just have a few more minutes. How do you talk with them? Do some preliminary work for them. Identify some funding opportunities that are of interest to you. If multiple institutes and centers support them, say, I would like to get supported by Fogarty and the National Cancer Institute. Because if one center doesn't support you with your score, then NCI has a chance to jump in and support you. So you have two chances to get funded. And then how do you reach out to them? Well, email them first. Don't cold call. Contact them. Ask them if you can have some time. Provide them with your specific aims. And then have a call where you have specific questions. Not, I don't know what to do and can you help me? But more about, I have multiple funding opportunities. Which one do you suggest? I have multiple study sections that I've researched. Are these the right ones? Does my research that you see in my specific aims fit with the grant portfolio that you have at NIH? All of these things will start a really good and helpful conversation with your program officer. They should be your friend and you should start a relationship with them. And then finally, two things that I mentioned earlier having to do with how I worked my Fulbright grant. Read the sponsor mission, read the research priorities, and write your research proposal to those interests. And if you do that, you've done half the work for the sponsor. And then finally, the reviewers, the study section reviewers' research criteria are publicly available to all of us. So go there, take a look at what the reviewers are being told are questions to search for to assess your grant. And if you respond to those questions in your grant, you're walking your reviewer through your proposal, making it so much easier for them, getting them as an advocate, and really helping to get your proposal be a little more funded. So with that, I'm going to say thank you and ask for questions. Thank you.
So you talked about the Fogarty Funding NIH proposals. If one were to, so one is obviously doing an international collaboration. Is there a separate budget for the international, or how does that work?
Yes, so there's a prime institute that is submitting. Either it would be the U.S. Institute or the international one, and then the subsequent partnering institute would be done as a subaward. So you could have, there's something called a multi-PI plan, so you could have each PI at each institution be equivalent. You have to add in some commentary about how you're going to work together, but one is prime and the other one is a subaward.
A question regarding e-health. I noticed you mentioned transformational tools and technologies. Mm-hmm. Would that fit under it? And it is, the institute is NIAID. What is that?
Okay. So it's yet another acronym. I don't exactly know what the antecedent is for that, but they do fund the tools and technologies. Was there a first question that you had there? What was that? Yeah. E-health would fit under this. Yes. Yes. And again, I recommend you talk to the scientific officer because they can tell you definitely, do they have a spot for this in their portfolio? Because they have an idea of what they're searching for this year, and they may have a gap in e-health. Oh yes, I want a proposal that has to do with e-health because then I will complete my portfolio and look good when I report to Congress.
Hi, Pedro Mateo Holever, CUNY School of Public Health. So I have quite a bit of experience in NIDA funded grants, R01s, etc. And I'm trying to kind of ascertain the difference between the NIDA funded R01s, say, with an international partner, and the Fogarty grants.
Yes.
Is the Fogarty work similarly, like they are project focused, specific research proposal, specific aims?
Yes.
So I guess what I'm trying to grasp is what's the difference between the NIDA funded international grants and the Fogarty grants?
So what will be added to ones that are supported by Fogarty are the mission and the vision and the priorities for Fogarty that you can write to. But the structure itself and the review process itself is the same for R01s. So if you have a NIDA grant like one of the ones here that supports something that Fogarty supports, then you have a chance of funding through two institutes. But for the most part, the structure and process of the grant is the same. Definitely read the funding opportunity because there may be things that Fogarty wants to see that a NIDA, sole NIDA opportunity didn't say. So there may be a section about global collaboration that you must add.
Now, a follow-up question, but kind of very obvious. Are the chance of scoring or funding similar within, say, NIDA and Fogarty, or they have a quote-unquote better chance because
Yeah.
there is less of an application?
Yeah, I don't have the rates, but they are published every year, and each institute has funding rates that are better or worse than other institutes. So I definitely would take a look at that. It's on something called NIH Reporter, and I would explore there what was Fogarty's funding success rate for 2018 is up, 2019 is not. But you can see that they funded 25% of their submissions, whereas currently NCI funds 10%. So definitely, if you fit it in Fogarty, submit to them, have them as your primary institute with a backup institute in case they want to fund it as well. Does that make sense? Okay.
Hi, Bansi from Queens College. My main question is on whether you can give some suggestion how to manage the clinical trial, particularly the PHI of the subjects on 2 countries.
Okay. That's an entire presentation in itself. There's a lot of rules and regulations that have come up around clinical trials, including what goes into the applications and including what you can put in associated with PHI. So I don't have like one succinct answer because it's an entire, it depends specifically on your type of research, on the PHI that you're working with. So what's the specific question? You want to know whether you can put PHI in an application?
The research may involve getting, say, at least the personal health information of the individual, right?
Yes.
To determine whether or not a particular intervention is effective.
Right.
Then in that case, particularly if it is just with the U.S., then we just go for the IRB of the institution.
Yes.
But right now, if this is international, so who takes the jurisdiction ownership of that? And also
I
the
see.
regulation on the HIPAA.
Okay.
How does that apply to subjects overseas? Like a whole bunch of other questions.
Right.
About that.
So usually the U.S. Institution has an IRB that can be considered the IRB of record for both the international collaborating university and ours. So if you have clinical trials at both places, someone has to be the IRB of record. Usually it's the U.S. institution because they're approved to be that. So then all of the clinical trials that are happening abroad would have to be reviewed by the IRB here. And certainly you're not putting in personal health information into the text of the grant, but you are submitting that information through something called clinicaltrials.gov, where you're giving the guidance as to how the trial went, the concerns about adverse effects,
Right.
all of that stuff is in a separate national federal database.
Right. So then the data management of the subjects overseas, they will be, in this case, subject to the U.S. regulation because
Yes.
the prime is, okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So,
We'll take one more question and then
One of the criteria that I've seen in the past by reviewers is that an international collaborator has expertise that is not matched here in the United States. Is that a concern within Fogarty, or is that a more generic concern across other institutes?
from what I've seen, that's a generic concern across institutes. I mean, so I'm considering that a benefit if they have something that is not available here. The reason why that it was a benefit to go to Switzerland where I went is because we didn't have RT-PCR here at the time. So certainly, if you're working on something that you can only get at another institute, that's a benefit for your international collaboration.
See, the problem is where there are researchers in the United States that are in similar areas
Okay.
who conceivably do have
Right.
that kind of expertise.
Right.
And so then rationalizing doing the
Exactly.
international collaboration becomes more difficult.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you have any tips on that.
So then it becomes about justifying the need to do that internationally. So if it's Fogarty-based, well, I'm trying to build a partnership with this agent, with this institution abroad. So that's why what they're doing is important, and they are experts at what they're doing, but Fogarty's more interested in having an international collaboration. So that's why it's better to do that here than with somebody in San Diego. That is a good one to answer. For ones with for ones in institutes where Fogarty is not supporting the opportunity, then I definitely would speak to the scientific officer and pose this question to them, because there is a justification that you could write, but they would have information from seeing other international applications go to that institute, get funded. How did they get funded? They could be able to tell you and help you in justifying it, but it would have to be strongly justified for that very purpose.